Hey guys, Frank here, aka F. Schuler on the TFW 2005 boards. I'm joined here today by Power of the Primes Volcanicus, and this is meant to serve as a companion video to a couple of upgrade pieces that I have recently produced and made available on the Radicons Customs forum on TFW 2005. All this stuff, right up front, all this stuff is available on Thingiverse. You can download it, print it yourself. If you have your own printer or have access to one or want to send it to Shapeways or somebody like that, feel free to download it. I hope you have good luck with it. I hope you enjoy it. But just to make sure it's crystal clear exactly how you're supposed to use this stuff and put it together and install it and what have you, I decided I'd put together a brief video just kind of giving you an overview about how to accomplish that as well as why I did this stuff in the first place. Now, Volcanicus, or a Dinobot combiner, a G1-inspired Dinobot combiner, is something a lot of us have been waiting for decades, literally. And I think they did a pretty good job. I like the general design. I like the proportions. I like the aesthetics. I think they did a fantastic job. But there are a couple of few things that I think he needs in order to be more functional. Let's put it that way, a little more reliable, and maybe even a little more aesthetically pleasing. Aesthetic-wise, this sunken-in area on either side of the chest, as well as those holes in the front there, I think those could do with some dressing up. Having the extra fists, the spare fists on the side, doesn't do too bad of a job with filling out the sides of the torso, but I think we need to install something in the front here, or have something extra in the front here, in order to beef that up a little bit. So what I've come up with will accomplish that. Aside from aesthetics, the toy does have what I consider one pretty severe design flaw. Anyone who has this figure and who has put Grimlock into his torso mode and has tried to rotate a combiner limb will have discovered this probably pretty quickly. Without even trying to turn the combiner limb, or actually without actually turning the combiner limb, you can see Grimlock's arm back here flexing. You know, you do that a couple or few times, what you're going to find is that, and I'm not turning it very hard at all, just enough to get the limb to rotate, it untabs from this panel, and then it's just complete flop city. That is a design flaw on the part of Hasbro and whoever designed this. I was actually kind of surprised to find that was the case. The first time I put him in torso mode, I thought, man, what were those guys thinking? Didn't they actually play with this thing after they got done designing it and producing a couple of prototypes and test shots and stuff? So this update is going to address that issue. I'm not here to bash Hasbro or Takara and whoever designed it. I'm sure they're under all kinds of constraints to get this thing done as quickly and cheaply as possible. I get it, but in this particular case, they basically made the toy almost unusable. At least not without a lot of frustration or without your own homebrew upgrades. Okay. The chest filler and arm support upgrade will ultimately be constructed into or assembled into one piece, but it's comprised of 4 separate pieces. I have here, in coming up with this thing, I came up with or wound up producing a bunch of prototype pieces. These are my test shots, and I'm dropping pieces right now. Yeah, each one of these were produced at various stages of coming up with this design for this damn chest fix. Sorry if I cuss, but just a test fit. Test the fit, test the design at various stages in the design process. The first real functional prototype I came up with, test shot if you will, was this. The front of the chest design is, it's kind of sloppy. This was printed at a layer height of 0.25 millimeters, so it's not terribly sharp, but this was just kind of like a proof of concept. Hey, is this thing actually going to work? I have since and I'll do a side-by-side, come up with a revised design for the front of the chest. The new, come on, focus camera. The new design is on the right. I got some pipe kind of designs, some larger vents here, extra design, little extra plastic down on the bottom, some polygonal, angular type surface design work. These things that actually, now that I look at it, kind of look like speakers. Man, they can be whatever you want, I suppose. And just some different types of features. Larger features than what I had on the original prototype, which these are supposed to be small hexagonal divots in the front of it. These were supposed to be these angular vent things. They were just too small. They don't come out real well on your typical, you know, consumer grade 3D printer. They can do okay, and they're not too bad. But I thought it could do with some beefier designs and a little more variation. This was the quick and dirty original. This is something I think I'm going to be happier with. This is printed at a layer height of 0.1 millimeter. It's printed using ABS filament. I love ABS filament. It prints, in my opinion, cleaner, easier. It's a little more forgiving than PLA. Plus, you can glue it with acetone, which you can use, but I tend to use this stuff. Plastruct bonding. You can get this at a lot of hobby shops, especially train-related hobby shops always seem to carry this, but any place that sells plastic models that you glue together, hobby shops anyway, you're not going to find it at Walmart, but at least none that I've ever found. This stuff works pretty well. This is for styrene and ABS. If I'm not mistaken, there is a Plastruct brand plastic solvent cement that I think is just for styrene. So if you're going to print in ABS and you want to use this cement, make sure you get the one that says it's also for ABS. Or it's something along those lines. There's one that only works for one type of plastic, and then there's this one that works for at least a couple types of plastic. You could print the parts in PLA if you want, and then glue them together with super glue, CA glue, cyanoacrylate glue, whatever you want to call it, and stick them together that way, because the solvent weld stuff really doesn't work for PLA at all. At least no solvents that I've tried or commonly get a hold of. ABS, for lots of reasons, I kind of prefer. It's a little more flexible, it's a little more forgiving as well. Not that it needs to flex, but anyway, I like ABS. So, since I don't have the latest prototype fully assembled yet, I'm going to demonstrate the installation of my existing prototype, which will be identical to the new, latest prototype. Demonstrate the installation of my existing one. Then I'm going to paint up and finish my new one, get it fully decorated, and show you guys at the end of this video what it looks like. Fully completed, final, and installed. Installation's pretty simple. You just saw me flip up the panels, untab the rear of Grimlock's lower leg here, rotate that back a little bit, and then click it down 1 or 2 notches. This side, untab, rotate back, rotate down a couple clicks, orientate this like this. Grimlock's head also has to be facing forward. Hopefully it won't get too awful fiddly here. There we go. We'll just rotate them all the way like that. It's a little tough to do with his combiner limbs already in place. He's just a little bit heavy, but you can finagle it in there. You push all the way back. There's not much of a click. There's a lot of friction in there to help hold him in place. Get him back there pretty solid. Flip Grimlock's head down. Rotate those forward. Lock him into position. Click that into place. Click that into place. This side, rotate forward. Click forward. Rotate leg back. Click into place. Tab into place. And then watch this shit. Bam. 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 It did pop a little bit. So I got a little bit violent. It's not perfect. But it's a lot more stable than what the original design is. basically what it does is these tabs that exist, sorry for shaking the camera, these tabs that exist on the side of the chest piece here, they've got little pegs. They have these little pegs right on the top of it there that will go up into the hole on the bottom side of Grimlock's leg. And that just helps to provide some support underneath the leg, and the little peg going up inside of the hole in Grimlock's leg will keep it from shifting forward and backward. Not perfect, but it is better than stock, and you don't have to worry about the thing flopping around and twisting around and everything every time you turn the damn combiner limb. It's a lot better than what the original design is from the factory. You can also see, let me get my big fat thumbs out of the way, you can also see that this does a halfway decent job of filling out the chest. Gives them a little more depth there, a little more depth there. You can see that I do have a cutout in the chest that Grimlock's dino head pops down into. I shouldn't say pops down into, it rests inside of. It doesn't really attach to it, of course. So yeah, I'm pretty happy actually with the way that turned out. This, again, is just sort of a test shot that I did. I've made some revisions compared to the final version that I think will be a little more aesthetically pleasing, and will probably wind up printing in somewhat higher quality, just due to the difference in the design. The features aren't quite as fine as that first prototype test shot. So what I'm going to do, guys, is assemble these pieces, and assembly is pretty straightforward. You take the front chest piece, and you take the rear support piece, kind of the foundation for everything. You line them up. Basically, you're going to get those top edges even with one another. Maybe at some point I'll come up with a system where you have some tabs that help to locate it, lock it into position for gluing. Or, you know, maybe even be able to install screws through the back or something along those lines. Might not be a bad idea. That way, if you wanted, you could have one of these and just have a series of screws that you, or a few screws that you undo in order to take off one chest piece and put on another one. Or you can just print multiple copies of the back and put in new chest fronts, chest pieces of your own design, if you so desire. So that'll go on there like that, and it'll get glued using whatever glue you might want to use. Then you get the side tabs. You can tell which direction is front by the angle. This angle here points toward the front, or it's always peg up and the short side toward the front. And you'll see these slots in the side of the piece right there. I find it easier if you start in the back like that, stick it in the slot, and then just sort of slide it forward, and it'll only go so far. There's a little stop, so to speak, in the slot. So that's how the orientation should be. Okay. Now, probably the most important thing is that this tab sit level. You don't want it cocked up here like this. You know, it could still work if it's cocked up there like that a little bit, but you want it to sit flat and level, which might require you, and I'm going to do this, might require you to use some files or an X-Acto blade or some sandpaper or something to get in there and sort of file that little shelf down. If you don't have a set of needle files, they come in super handy for stuff like this. You're not going to have to remove much material. At a layer height of 0.1 millimeter, the ridges are not terribly prominent. It only takes a few swipes with the needle file to get things flattened out. You can see that's already made, focus camera, a little bit of an improvement, at least. There we go. And also to square up that slot a little bit. It's not a bad idea. I'm putting the file in on the side, and I'm pushing that direction as well as down to kind of square up the insides of that slot. You don't want to take out too much material, because you do want this tab to still be kind of snug in the slot. We just want it to be able to sit flat. Now it goes in there a little bit easier, but there's still a little bit of grip, there's still a little friction, you know. It's hanging in there just by friction alone right now. That's pretty level. That's pretty good. You might also, and again, depends on your printer settings and how smoothly it prints, but you might benefit from actually filing the top of the tab just a little bit, right where the thing slides into the slot on the side of the chest piece. Not removing much material, but there's a little bit of extra on the top surface finish. For anyone who's 3D printed, the top surface is usually at least a tiny bit rough, so it might benefit from some of that. Square things up as you need to, get rid of any little extra ridges maybe you have on the sides here. Just a few swipes is all it's going to take, not much. Okay. Then slide that thing back in. And you can go, I mean, you can go straight in if you want, but I just find it's easier to start there at the back, the rear of that slot, and slide the thing forward. Let's slide it forward. Okay, now, gluing. Get my Plastruck bonding. And I found it seems to glue pretty easily if I turn the thing in this orientation and just drip some of the cement down the back of that slot. It will, and then hold it vertically, and it will just capillary action. It'll kind of carry that that cement through the back side of that channel. I'm going to lay some along the back side here. I'm going to lay some along the top here. Watch that stuff soak in. Don't worry if you get a little much on the outside, it's not going to be a big deal. And then make sure it's nice and tight in that slot. Hold it kind of level, and it's a solvent weld joint. They usually tack up and start to stick pretty quickly. You can always clamp it if you want, if you're so inclined or so equipped, but you don't have to. Alright, go to the other side. I probably should have filed this before I glued the other side, but whatever. I'm going to go in and file that a little bit flat, make sure that slot is cleaned out. File that. Whoops, I keep bumping this damn stand. File that. Kind of get the back side good and cleaned out, good and straight. Yeah, seriously, needle files are where it's at. You don't have any, get your ass to Harbor Freight. Spend $5 or $6 or whatever they cost, and you get a whole set of them. You get like 10 of them, 12 of them, whatever. They come in a little plastic pouch. I love them. They work awesome. I probably have a couple different sets. It seems like different sets have slightly different designs and different profiles. Here's what they look like. Needle file set. Well, why do they call them needle files? Well, because they're tiny. They're like little, well, they're not as small as a needle. Horse needle, maybe, but they're just smaller than your standard files for pretty delicate stuff. They come in handy. I use those damn things all the time. Not as often as the Swiss Army knife, but still pretty often. Okay, next tab. Starting in at the back. Insert and slide forward. Ooh, nice firm fit. That felt good going in. Sorry. Go to the back. Drip. A little solvent there. On top here. A little solvent. And along the bottom here, a little solvent. Let's get a little more. Bam. Okay. Oh yeah, and this Plastruck bonding stuff, guys, the vapors can be harmful. So I'm going to urge you not to let the bottle sit open. Always put the little brush cap back in place in between uses, and then if you're going to store the stuff, obviously, screw that lid down, because you're, you know, if you leave it open, you're not only wasting cement, but you're also letting those vapors get out. That's not the best stuff for you, you know. Vapor harmful, eye irritant. Do not sniff. Don't sniff, kids. Don't sniff glue. It's good advice. Okay. And this piece. This is kind of a pain in the ass. I'm sorry for doing this to you. I am going to have to come up with some kind of tabs or something. Make this thing a little bit simpler to put in place. Get some of that solvent in there. Glue that bastard up. Squeeze it together. You know, you want to hold it for a minute, you know, just to make sure everything is locked up. This is going to look sweet. This is going to look sweet. Guys, I'm going to put a little more glue on the back side of that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint this thing up. I'm going to paint her up, and I am going to show you guys the end result of all my hard work. And then you all can be ungrateful, download it for nothing, and have it for your very own. I'm kidding. I like you guys. I did this, and I'm giving it away because I like you guys, and because I feel like Hasbro owes everyone who bought this toy these fixes, but I'm going to do it for them. I mean, come on, Hasbro, you're not a software company, you're a hardware company. Your shit's got to work right out of the box. And I can't say he doesn't work, it's just he doesn't work for long. So he's like poorly designed hardware. How's that? Yeah, I love Hasbro. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't have fucking Transformers at all. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Alright, so that is going to look sweet. Imagine what that's going to look like all painted up. I still haven't thought about exactly what colors I'm going to use, but man, it's going to be pretty awesome. And one of these days I'm going to stop using a cell phone to record YouTube videos. Or maybe I'll use a better cell phone. This one's old. Focus, focus, focus. Alright, I'll paint this up, guys, and I'll be back. And with the magic of YouTube, guys, we are now back. You can see that the new chest shield has been fully painted and installed on Volcanicus. I used, to paint it, I used testers, Model Masters, acrylics, paints, and just plain old testers acrylic paints. You can get them at most hobby shops. See if I can get the focus here and kind of get the light levels correct. Okay, silver, Model Masters, testers, works awesome. Gold, testers, acrylic. Old as hell. I don't know how old that jar of paint is, but it still works just fine. And you can thin it out with alcohol if you want, and then just more testers, acrylic, red, silver, red, and gold on the chest plate. Nothing too terribly fancy. I'll give you guys a closer look at what I've done. Whoops! Squeaks just took a dive. He's been kind enough to hold another accessory, which I forgot to show you guys earlier, which we'll go over here in just a minute. I didn't airbrush it. I didn't spray it on. I just dry brushed it. What I have not done, and I may do, is just a wash of black mixed with future floor polish, black acrylic, either black acrylic ink. I might use some ink. I might just use some black acrylic paint. I've actually got some of this wash mixed up I've used for other stuff. It's you just sort of add black paint to some future floor polish, does a pretty good job, lays in the low spots, fills it in, gives it some extra shadowing effect, and works pretty well, but I'm not 100% sure I'm going to do it, to be honest with you. Before I painted it, I took my trusty needle files, which I had described to you guys earlier, and flattened out some of the flat spots, smoothed off some of the contour areas, and just to kind of get rid of some of the 3D printing artifacts and ridges and what have you. You know, it's not perfect, but it's not too bad. If I had sprayed on the silver a little bit heavier as opposed to just brushing it on, dry brushing it on, it would be a little more consistent, but it kind of gives it a sort of a, I don't know, a gunmetal antique-y sort of a look. I kind of like the way it turned out, and I think if I do the wash, and not a real heavy black wash, but if I put the wash on, I think it'll bring out some of the details even more. But I'm real happy with the way this thing turned out. These areas down here are actually recessed in the model, so I just got a drop of red paint at the end of the paintbrush and just dripped it in there, and then it flows and fills in that little recessed area, and you get really sharp edges and corners on those red accents. I just painted gold on top of the pipe pieces here, or whatever you might want to call them, circuitry, main bus cables, who knows what, and I float a little bit of red into a couple of the recessed areas up in here. These circular silver and gold doohickeys right here on in that detail, kind of meant to emulate sort of that, just to kind of make this design theoretically, at least generally, tie into the rest of the figure design aesthetics and some of the angles and some of the other features. Same thing with some of the angular red pieces here, the hexagonal gold piece there, meant to kind of tie in with some of the other geometry and colors and color scheme of the rest of the model. Basically just to try to get it to tie in with everything else. I wanted it to look like it was meant to be on this bot. It's just to kind of tie in with the overall aesthetic. I also thought that maybe dry brushing it instead of airbrushing the silver on might help it to match the existing silver elsewhere on the bot, like Snarl's legs, for example, are actually a pretty clean, bright-looking silver, but the rest of the gray plastic is just silvery gray, so I wanted something that would kind of match the rest of it. I didn't want this bright chrome-looking chest or something like that. Overall, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Things are a lot more stable than it would be with a stock robot. You know, obviously, as you saw earlier, if I really overdo the rotation, it can still come untabbed, but it's going to hold together a lot better now than it would without the chest piece. As I had stated before, this chest upgrade does also include holes that allow you to install your extra fists. Let them peg right in there, so you can kind of help to fill out the sides of the bot. You know, even though that thin waist does kind of match like the beast aesthetics and beast design of the beast Dinobot combiner from some of the comics, I don't mind it, but I do like this more filled out design that this chest piece and that these extra fists help to afford. So, you know, there it is, guys. If you look down in the description, if you haven't already, you're going to see links to a couple of different things. You're going to see a link to the thread on TFW 2005 that kind of gives you a little bit of the backstory and the progression of the design and the initial design and this, that, and the other, as well as a link to the Thingiverse page where you can go to download the STL files for this chest piece, which includes the front chest piece, the rear foundation piece, and the two tab pieces, as well as this piece, which I have not discussed yet. I actually kind of forgot to discuss it. It's not minor by any means, at least I don't think. It's actually the first upgrade I came up with for Volcanicus, and if I hold it up a little bit higher, it's this here sword. Squeaks is holding it. It's unfortunately, it's a little bit too heavy for Squeaks. Well, maybe not. He is holding it. 5mm peg compatibility. Sorry, Squeaks, you're going to have to take a backseat here for a moment. Yeah, so this is a sword design that I came up with. This is heavily influenced by the Energo sword that is carried by the Beast or Volcanicus in other comic adaptations and other parts of Transformers lore and information and stuff that's out there. I added a lot of my own little design details, hexagonal, whatever you want to call that portion there, but the general blade shape and design, the back of it, just the whole thing generally, the general aesthetic is borrows pretty heavily from some existing media that's out there, but I did put my own little flair on it. And again, this is all printed in black ABS plastic, 3D printed by me, painted by me using Testors acrylics paints, and this one actually did receive that future floor polish black wash, very mild black wash, but you can see how it helps to bring out a little bit of the details and the depth, especially down in the hexagonals and some of those different areas. I also went over it with some silver, dry brushed some silver over top of that to make it look a little bit worn. Anyway, guys, you know, comment, you know, click like, whatever. Let me know if you have any questions. By all means, visit the TFW 2005 customs page. Let people know what you think if you're a TFW 2005 member. If you're not a member, join up. It's free. It's a great community. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, thanks for watching, and good luck. And leave a comment if you print one yourself. And I hope you do, and I hope you enjoy it. See you guys later.